Kids are tough. Hi, Jake.
Find your bottle of water.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Appreciate that. Well, good evening, everyone. Appreciate you coming out and being with us. We're on lesson 8. We're going to talk about the last 2 books of poems, or poetry, and then we're going to go into the major prophets. Tonight we're going to talk about Ecclesiastes and the Song of Solomon, and then a little bit of time is spent on the book of Isaiah. I appreciate everybody calling, texting, asking about Mom. She finally made it back over to Wingate this evening about 5:30. Health-wise, she's in pretty good shape. She's really not having any pain from the hip surgery. But today the dementia was really setting in. She was pretty well kind of out in space. And a lot of different. She wanted to know when the circus was coming to town. So, anyway, that's just part of it. A lot of you have dealt with that, so you know what it's like. It's good to see Tammy Barrett with us. Glad she's able to get out. Keep Daryl Dixon's family, Dosha, in your prayers. His service will be Saturday afternoon down at Rollins. A lot of you probably don't even know Daryl. I couldn't tell you the last time he was here at service. It's been a long time ago. He was not faithful for a while, and then he repented and came back, and then he got sick to where he couldn't get out. So, but keep Dosha, especially, and the rest of the family in your prayers. Before we get started, let's stop and have a word of prayer. Our Father in heaven, we're thankful for this day and for all the many blessings of life, and especially for this opportunity we have to assemble and to study your word, and we ask that you guide us through this study. We thank you so much for all that you do for us, and especially for everyone in this congregation. We continue to pray for those that are sick. It's good that we have some back that have not been able to be with us. And at this time, we ask that you be with Dosha and the rest of the Dixon family, and ask that you continue to help them through this difficult time. We thank you again for Jesus and for his blood that was shed on that cross, that we can have the forgiveness of our sins when we come repenting of them. In his name we pray, and amen. I forgot to mention Ruth. She's still not able to get out, and Philip is on his way back from taking Stephen to the airport in Lexington. So Michelle said he was supposed to fly out yesterday. He was about 10 minutes late. They gave his seat away yesterday, so they had to come back and then go back today. So keep him in your prayers that he has a safe trip back out to Seattle. The book of Ecclesiastes, probably written around 940 to 930 BC. It was written more than likely in the latter part of Solomon's life. If you look over on the left side of that front page where they've got all the divisions in the years down there, I'm glad they do that, because I really struggle in the BC era, because you're going backwards, I guess. You're going from a big number down to 0. And so I struggle with the years and when all this falls. But Ecclesiastes would have been written there under that block that's number 9, the divided kingdom. Of course, we know that Solomon's kingdom was divided after he died. And so that would have fell into that period right in there. What does Ecclesiastes mean? The preacher, yeah. And so who wrote Ecclesiastes? Well, Solomon. But as usual, there are skeptics. There are those that question that. There are some that say, and I don't know how you. Well, I guess I do know how you would know that. You'd be a scholar of it. But some say that the language, I guess, kind of the style that the book was written, that language would not have been used back in that period. It was it would have been foreign to the way, I guess, a Jew or Hebrew would have spoke, according to some. And then some also talk about that there's dissimilar styles and diction between Proverbs, Ecclesiastic, and Song of Solomon. But most of the other scholars kind of discount that because there's 3 different books. He's writing about 3 different subjects. So just the same as you and I, if we were writing books, we might use different ways of speaking, writing 3 totally different books on 3 different subjects. So most of your scholars discount really that argument. But like I said, there's always a few skeptics that, that's got to be out there that says this or that, or, well, this couldn't have happened, or they are skeptical of even some of the historical time frames. But for the most part, everybody you read after Solomon was who wrote it. I tend to believe that primarily based on, if you'll turn over to chapter 1 and verse 12, it pretty much tells you, I think, you let the Bible comment on the Bible for the most part. The Bible is its best commentary. Chapter 1 verse 12 says, I, the preacher, was king over Israel and Jerusalem. I think that's pretty clear who that's talking about. Yeah, exactly. So that's why I said the Bible is its best commentary. And so I'm tending to go with this.
Another thing, too, they say, well, people didn't talk about this back then. Well, there's a lot of things that you did back then that people around them didn't do. It was very different. Most of it was miraculous.
Right.
The reason why you talk like this is because he had that miraculous gift of knowledge.
Yeah. Wonder, I better not go there. I'm not going to say anything. No comment. Yes, you're exactly right, Sal. No, yes, you're right. He did. He had a lot of influence. Yeah. Do what? Yes, exactly. Yes, we do. Yeah. It's all politics. Yeah. Well, now you're right. His marriages with the 700 wives, a bigger portion of it was politics. It was, yeah, exactly. Yeah, it sure was. Let's see. I got some other notes here. Let's come back to some of this in a minute. Ecclesiastes shows what?
It shows what it's like to live a life apart from God and chase after all these worldly pleasures, alcohol, women. He finds none good in his.
I like that answer, Jake. That's a good answer. He say it again so everybody can hear you. Living a life apart from God. He tried. Whatever was out there, he tried, didn't he? If it was available, he tried it. Yeah, living apart from God. I like that.
Basically, his whole thesis here is the search for meaning of life. What is the real meaning of life?
You just answered number 4. That's the whole thing that he's writing about in this book. What is the meaning of life? Yeah, and he finally reaches that conclusion. We'll come back to that in just a minute. Down in question 6, he finally reaches out what that is. Well, let's read a couple more verses. Still in chapter 1, we'll start with verse 1. We'll just go down a couple of verses. But like Sid says, verse 1 says, the words of the preacher, the son of David, king of Jerusalem. We know who that is. It's Solomon. Vanity of vanities, says the preacher. Vanity of vanities, all is vanity. What profit has a man from all his labor in which he toils under the sun? One generation passes away and another generation comes. He makes this statement, vanity of vanities. One place, I didn't go through and count them all up. One place I've got marked in here, he says it 37 times, but then the book says he says that 39 times. Regardless, he says a lot. that everything is vanity. Everything that we do, we get caught up in the world, and we really, we go, especially if you're working. I haven't really slowed down too much since I retired. I'm doing other things. But, we just think we're operated by the clock. We run our lives by the clock, and everything's got to be done, this and this and this and this and this. At the end of the day, when you step back and you look at it, did it really matter that I didn't get the grass mowed today? Is it really that big of a deal? And that's what he's talking about right there in verse 4. There's one generation, they accumulate all this stuff. When that generation dies, another generation comes along and they take over all that stuff, or they get their own stuff. A significant fact about Solomon, we know he was the wealthiest of all the kings at this time frame. The taxes that were paid to this man on a yearly basis, 29 tons of gold a year. Today's market, a ton of gold is worth $55.8 million. Times 29. I've got the number. It's over $1.6 billion with a B, billion dollars. That's what he got collected in taxes in 1 year. Not counting anything else that he received. He had... That's what I'm saying. Yeah, oh yeah. Yeah. Do I, Waldo? Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, where is it? He had, let me find the notes here. He had all of his drinking vessels. Everything he took a drink out of was made out of gold. He had 1,400 chariots, 12,000 horsemen. He surpassed all the kings of the earth in riches and gold, but yet he constantly writes that all of it was useless. It was all in vain. He was, go ahead.
Really? Elvis had an interview once, asked him about all the riches he had and all that, and asked him if, does it fulfill your happiness?
No.
Actually, it's actually the opposite. I think it's Elvis, if I'm not mistaken.
Constantly searching for something else. He also uses the term under the sun in this book. And it's like 27 times he uses that. He's, just like Jake said, he searched, he tried everything under the sun. He looked for it all. He tried it all. And so, number 5, Solomon found that happiness was not found in what? What's the first one?
Much wisdom.
Earthly wisdom, much wisdom. Yeah, even though God blessed him with so much wisdom, he still didn't find happiness with that. How about number 2? What's in chapter 2, verses 1 and 2? Pleasure, yeah. Okay. Number 3, wine, drink, alcohol. Yeah. So many people turn to that. You watch so many TV shows, and when I'm driving a lot, I listen to the old Sirius XM that's got the old radio stations and stuff. So you're all the time listening to, I like the old Cowboys shows or the old detectives and stuff. And they're constantly, let's go get a drink. Let's have a drink. How about a drink? Do you need a drink? And he says, a drink and a drink and a drink. It's like, man, people. D, I thought was interesting. What was he looking for in the chapter 2, verses 4 through 7?
Yeah, that's possessions.
Possessions, buildings, homes, vineyards, gardens. He searched for all this stuff, didn't he? Yeah, he didn't search for it. Yeah, he had all of it. And more, and then more. Yeah. F, what was F?
And riches. Well,
I'm sorry, E. Yes, riches, silver and gold. Yes, I'm sorry, I skipped one there. Yeah. He was wealth. He wanted for nothing. He lacked nothing. Okay. What was F? Music. Yeah, it's kind of strange. Well, I don't mean it in a strange way, but he sought out any place he could find it. Sure. Pardon me? Well, that may have had a part in it. It's quite possible. Yeah. Yeah. So he had that. He had that background.
What do you call it? Sweet singer? Is he a sweet singer?
Could have.
He met one of the Spice Girls. She brought him Spice.
Okay, moving on. What was G? What was he looking for in G? Greatness, success, earthly fame. Yeah, don't we all want our 5 minutes of fame, don't we? Everybody seems like everybody does. And the more and more with our phones and TikTok and all this other stuff, more and more people are finding their little place of fame, so to speak. And then the last one, what was he trying to find in the last one there? Yeah, that's what I had. Work, trying to find fulfillment in work, trying to find fulfillment in doing something constructive. Again, he tried it all. But what's he say in number 6? What's he? Yeah. Fear God and keep His commandments. And I like some of the translations use the word duty, and I think if I looked at it correctly, I think the duty was italicized, which means it would have been added in there. And so, therefore, the thought of it is fearing God and keeping His commandments is the whole man. It's what we are. It isn't hard to find, is it? So many are out searching for it. It isn't hard to find. We've got to do what it says, and we've got to study it and know what it is. But God tells us what the whole duty of man is.
And I think that makes everything make sense. Like, why is there suffering? Why is there pain? Well, if we understand the purpose God had in creating the world, it's for us to fear Him and keep it.
It's for us to put our trust in Him.
All that stuff starts coming together.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that makes a lot of sense.
It does. It really does.
I'm not in a horrible situation, so I can't see it as somebody else might see it. But just from a non-empathetic view, more unexperienced view, right?
Yeah. You're not going to get your life together until you do find God, until you come to Him. Your life's never going to be together. Your life's never going to have order or meaning to it. One thing I wanted to point out, I've got a note to read it. I don't remember exactly what my thought was in this. I'll be perfectly honest with you. Turn over to chapter 9 of Ecclesiastes. And verse 5 again. I think it still had something to do with Solomon searching for the meaning of life, this duty of man. But something's interesting about this. Haven't had some notes from previous studies, probably from Bill or David's class. But when you read verse 5, chapter 9, it says, "For the living know that they will die, but the dead know nothing, and they have no more reward, for the memory of them is forgotten." And then when you read 6, it says, "Also their love, their hatred, and their envy have now perished. Nevermore will they have a share in anything done under the sun." I guess the comment that I wanted to make is kind of going down a little bit of a rabbit hole, but it isn't at the same time. We hear so many people, because we've talked about this in some of the other classes about when we die and what happens, where we go. Luke even had his lesson on it just Sunday night was about it. But we hear so many people say, so-and-so's in heaven and so-and-so is watching down on me and so-and-so, I wonder who so-and-so is rooting for in the Super Bowl. They're dead and they're in heaven. Wonder who they're hoping wins the Super Bowl and stuff. Verse number 5, but the dead know nothing. The dead don't know anything what's going on with the world. in anything done under the sun, the things of this earth. Once we're dead, our earthly cares are over. We don't care what's going on in the world.
We're really doing a disservice by not denying that.
But not denying what?
That lie.
Yeah.
People are watching over us.
Yeah.
The one we need watching over is God. That's all we really.
As long as He's.
Who cares if
We sing a song that all seeing eye, watching you, and that's the only one that matters.
Exactly. That's what He just said. God's the only one that we need to care about who's watching. Yeah. Again, the whole duty of man, the whole of man, fear God, keep His commandments. Put Him first in your life. These other things will take care of themselves. The riches, the fame, if He so blesses you to that, use it to His honor and glory. If He doesn't, use what you have, do what you can. We're all at different stages in life as far as what we can, what we can't do, what we have, what we don't have. The whole thing is use what you have for His glory, for His honor. Do your best with it. Live your life for Him. What's interesting as you read through Ecclesiastes, hopefully you took time to read some of it, he goes through all this stuff, all this vanity and vanities. He tries everything under the sun, and then he comes to the conclusion, the fearing God and keeping His commandments. That whole part of chapter 8 is all talking about us growing old. Talks about our eyes getting dim, or our teeth falling out, or talks about your grinders and stuff like that, your teeth. Go back and read through chapter 12. He's getting close to the end of his life, and he's starting to realize what he's done, where he's been, and probably where he should have been or what he should have done. But he's got some good things to say about coming toward the end of life. Anything on Ecclesiastes anybody wants to add? All right. Well, we'll move over to Solomon. We're still on schedule, on track here. Some interesting things about the Song of Solomon. Again, it's written about 960 BC, possibly a little later than that. Maybe as late as 922 BC. It was written before the split of the northern and southern kingdoms. You won't find any quotes in the New Testament using the Book of Solomon or the Song of Solomon. Every other book, as far as I know, in the Old Testament has at least one quote in the New Testament. The Song of Solomon does not. Chapter 1 and verse 1 of the Song of Solomon talks about it being the best song. So there must be other songs, but this is the best one, which I thought was kind of interesting.
I was going to say that a lot of folks, when they're studying the Old Testament, sometimes will skip Song of Solomon because, to be honest with you, a lot of them think it's kind of blue.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe a little too suggestive, a little too provocative.
Right.
But not understanding that it is a love song. It's a love poem.
Mm-hmm.
So if you get in the weeds a little bit, maybe you can be bothered by it. But really, it's a beautiful thing. It's describing a beautiful thing. Yeah. It has a peculiar form of composition. It could be called, and I don't know what this means exactly, but it could be called a lyricum dramatic poem. But it is not a drama in the sense that it is either intended or adapted for representation, like a play, or in today's time a TV show or a movie or something. It's a love story, yeah. It consists entirely of a dialogue or a monologue. There's three characters in here. You have the bride, and then you have one that is called the beloved, or some versions say the king. Some say both in different places. And then you have a group, a chorus. And the bride, what's interesting about her is she really considers herself pretty low. You got the king that's way up here, and she is just a little Shulamite maid, you might say. I mean, she is insignificant, really, but she thinks of herself that way as well. And we don't know much about Shulamite. We know that in 2 Kings chapter 4, verses 8 through 37, we know
Elisha was helped by a Shulamite widow. Some people think that the Shulamite kind of goes with the same thing as Shunem, Shunem, which is a small village, part of the territory of Issachar in the northern part of Jezreel. Don't really know. We're not really told much about what the Shulamite is or where they came from. The book is also interesting in that it has a lot of references to natural things out in the world, natural scenes. He names plants 18 different times, 18 different plants. He names 13 different animals in this song. And it was written during a time of peace and prosperity. So it was during the time of Solomon's kingdom when everything was going pretty well. They weren't into battles with people and everything. And it also is a real historical event. And it's the only record of a marriage of Solomon that we have. He had 700 wives, but this is the only record of an actual wedding ceremony, the actual courtship, everything that would involve in a man and woman getting married. And she was obviously very beautiful, because he talks about her in so many different ways about how beautiful she was. Very graphic in some of them. Yeah. Yep. So we know that Solomon wrote it, and the Song of Solomon shows what? Number 8. Pure love. I mean, that's what it's based on. It's based on pure love between a man and a woman. Yeah. This next part, number 9, is a little, you can put a lot of different things in here. So it talks about the outline of the book. So chapters 1 through chapter 3 and verse 5, what did you put in there? Okay. I put courtship, which kind of goes the same thing that is. Talks about the bride being in his chambers, being in his midst. They were together. I don't take it as a bad way before they were married. They were, it was a courtship process. It talks about them being out in nature and out in different places, but they were together. So what does chapter 3 versus first part of chapter 5 kind of talk about? What's wedding and praise and love? Yeah, that's kind of what I had. I had like a wedding procession maybe. The bride does a lot of talking in this particular part, kind of a monologue kind of a thing. So what's the last part? C there. Challenges and everlasting love. Yeah, I put a little bit, maybe the honeymoon kind of takes place there, the marriage ceremony, the honeymoon, and then they get into, the challenges that a couple faces and the devotion that they need to have. If you think about this, Solomon's got a lot of good advice in this. It's a shame he didn't really heed to it, We don't know if this is his first wife, second wife. We don't know exactly where she falls in line with all of them. I think that it was pretty early on myself. That's just my thinking. But what he's trying to say is, you need to stay with the person that you marry. You marry for until death do us part. And there's so many that I'm tired of you. It's been a year and a half. Let's go do something else. No, you need to figure out your problems, work out your problems, and it's till death do you part. That's why it's so important. That's why we need to stress to our young people. It's so important on who you marry. Can't stress that enough. We've all been there. We've all seen it. We all know the results of a man and woman being together that shouldn't have been together from the very start. And if Solomon had listened to his own advice, probably these 700 wives, he probably wouldn't have had these 700 wives, but these 700 women that he had as wives, more than likely would not have drawn him away from God the way they did. Again, to be such a wise man, I don't mean to call him stupid, but in some sense he was stupid. In my book, in my judgment. Again, it is a good book. And I appreciate Bill. I don't know how many years ago it's been, but I've got so many. I got a lot of notes that obviously came from your and David's study on that book. But it is a good book. It's a book you ought to read. It's a book that a husband and a wife really ought to read. A lot of good things in there about how to treat each other, the importance of staying together, the importance of who you marry, the whole thing, everything. Good for young couples, exactly. Yep. Okay. Any other comments?
Everyone likes to get told to like sheep children. That's every girl's favorite compliment.
That her teeth are like sheep. What to say, sheep what?
Or like a flock of sheep.
Or like a flock of sheep. Yeah. A lot of good compliments, guys. We need to read through this, use some of these compliments. Yeah. Yeah. Like Bill said, though, it is a little tough to read it sometimes, but take time to read it. It's a good, and again, God put it in there for a purpose. It's in our Bible, so we need to read it. We need to study it. We need to apply it to our life. It's there for a reason.
And it probably is not quoted because it has nothing to do with like prophecy or history or
Yeah.
anything like that. I mean,
It's yeah, possible.
It's just,
Yeah. It's interesting that there's no reference at all in the New Testament.
some
Yeah,
people
yeah.
think it is about Christ and the church, which is
No.
weird to me. I don't know. But I've heard that before.
Yeah, it reads like a play, exactly. Yeah. Okay, we got about 10 minutes, well, about 9 minutes. We move on here. The next part we're going to move into are the major prophets. Well, let's back up number 10. So let's name these off real quick. So the books of poetry, the books of history are what? The books of Moses. Thank you, Keith. Yeah. So we got 5, don't we? Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. Yep. And then, yeah, history goes all the way from Joshua all the way to Esther. So all those books in between there. And then the poetry books we just looked at are Job, Psalms, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, Song of Solomon. Right. Okay. And it's interesting, again, how we talked last week. They all, a lot of them intertwine. There were a lot of them written during the same period. Kind of, some of it, as you read it, is chronological. Some of it goes back to what you read in the previous books. I'm glad we actually kind of have gone back through it again because I've taken some time to read a lot of it and a lot of things that, you forget over the years. And so it's been good on my behalf to go back through this study and look at some of it. All right, so the major prophets. Who are the major prophets? Right, so we got Isaiah, Jeremiah, Lamentations, Ezekiel, and Daniel. Now, number 12, the major prophet books are distinguished as such solely because of their authorship. What else? Their size, yeah. They're not called major prophets or minor prophets because this one group is esteemed above the other group. It's purely based on the size of the book itself. Some of the minor prophets are only a few chapters. Maybe. Everything that I got inferences to is really just based on the size of the book itself, the number of chapters or volume or however you want to split. They didn't have chapters and verses, of course, when it was written, but it's based on the sheer size of the book. Some of them, those 5, are bigger than these others, than the minor prophets. And like I said, it's not that one's more important than the other. They're all of equal importance. They're all prophets of God, as Jeff said. So number 13, the primary function of the prophets was to be God's what concerning the sins of Israel. Yeah, they were a spokesperson. They were a messenger. Yeah, they were how God got the message out to the people. Didn't have the written word again, did they? I mean, they had bits and pieces of the Old Testament. Some of the law was written down and some different things, but it wasn't like what we've got now and as handy as what we have now. No excuse for us not to know God's will, is there? We have it. I mean, how many different copies of the Bible do you have in your house? These people were lucky if there was one set of scrolls for every 1,000, 10,000. I don't know. It just wasn't plentiful back then. Number 14, the first 2 major prophets. Okay, so when do they live? Yes, before at the start. So if you go back to the first page, you'll see that the Babylonian captivity started somewhere in that block number 10. The Syrian captivity and the Babylonian captivity started off in there. So that's about the time when Isaiah and Jeremiah. Over on the next page there, well, let's go ahead and answer number 15 and we'll kind of come back. The last two major prophets are what? Ezekiel, Daniel, and they lived among the captives after what? After Jerusalem fell, after that city was destroyed. So Isaiah's time frame is around 740 BC. So again, if you look back on the other page, you'll see about the things that are going on there when Isaiah was doing his thing. He prophesied. He worked. Okay, I got to find all my notes here. Okay, where'd it go? I've lost it again. Oh, here it is. He began to preach 38 years before the fall of the new northern kingdom. And someplace, I couldn't find it again this morning when I was looking for it. I thought someplace that he had preached, worked a total of around 60 years total. I don't know where I read that, but I couldn't find it again this morning. But so don't hold me to that.
That probably makes sense because it looks like he starts when Uzziah dies.
Yeah.
Isaiah 6:1 says the word God appeared to him at the death of Uzziah.
Yeah. After the reign of Uzziah. About 60 years. Okay, maybe that's. Yeah, maybe that's how I came up with it. Maybe I actually did some math or something. I doubt it. I'm sure I read it someplace. Yeah, too much work. So anyway, so he is in that time frame when the kingdom's divided. He preaches primarily to the northern kingdom. Assyria is becoming a threat to the northern kingdom. We talked about this last week before last, I believe. He was God's prophet to the kings of Judah. And so number 16, Isaiah chapter 1, verse 1, we know who wrote it. That was pretty simple. He wrote it. And Isaiah was called to be a prophet by who? By Jehovah. He was called out by Jehovah himself, chapter 6. Yeah, exactly. So we got about a minute, so we got to move on down through this. The first part deals with Israel, Judah, and the nations and foretells what? The captivity, their fall, and not the fall only of the northern kingdom, even the southern kingdom, but all the nations, all of them. I mean, Egypt, Edom, all of these were all taken over by other nations, other groups. The last part deals with Judah's return from Babylonian captivity and the blessings intended for them when what? When deliverance comes. Yeah. Okay. So what's the Messianic chapter? Isaiah 53. Boy, so much is in that chapter. We could spend so much time on that chapter. What really to remember and to take home out of that chapter is Isaiah writes this 700 years before Christ is crucified. No way a regular man just like you and I would know this. He had to have been a prophet from God. He had to have had God tell him about these things, write these things down. 700 years, 7 centuries before Christ is crucified, Isaiah is writing these things down, telling what's coming. Suffering servant's what he's called, isn't it? Yeah. All right, the last one, real quick. What does Isaiah prophesy? What's the first one? Fall of the nations. What's the second one? The captivity and the return of Judah. Yeah, coming back to Jerusalem. And then what? Coming of Christ. Yeah. Very good. Thank you all very much. We will move on into the other books of the major prophets next week. Whoa, there we go.